Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're settling in to talk about a figure who quite honestly feels like a bit of a secret giant.
Yeah.
Specifically in the world of British music.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be looking at the life and really the immense work of Francis John Routh.
It's a pleasure to be here. And secret giant is actually a really apt way to put it.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you just look at the surface, you see a composer.
Right.
But when you start digging into the sources, and we do have a really great stack of material to go through today, you realize he was just so much more than that.
Exactly. I mean, usually when we do these dives, we're looking at someone who did, one thing really, really well.
The specialist.
Right. The specialist. The guy who spent 40 years perfecting the violin sonata, or the woman who only wrote about, say, medieval chant. But Routh feels like he's a triple threat.
In the theatrical sense.
Well, no, not singing and dancing, but in the context of classical music history. He wasn't just sitting in a room somewhere writing notes on a page, waiting for the muse to strike.
No, not at all.
He was a prolific composer, yes.
Yeah.
But he was also a dedicated author and a historian, documenting the music of his time. And perhaps, surprisingly to me, he was a tireless organizer.
Yes.
He actually built platforms for other people.
And that is the key right there. That third pillar.
The organizing.
The organizer, exactly. That's what makes him such a fascinating case study for us. He wasn't just creating art. He was creating the ecosystem for art to exist. And we're talking about a massive span of time here.
Oh, the dates alone are staggering.
Yeah.
Born in 1927 and he died in 2021.
Which is...
That's 94 years.
Right. It's a life that effectively spans the entire modern era of British classical music.
Truly.
I mean, he saw the post-war reconstruction, the avant-garde explosion of the 60s.
The shift into the digital age.
All the way to the 21st century. He was there for the invention of talking pictures, and he was there for the rise of digital streaming.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To use Francis Routh as a lens. We want to see how his career serves as a microcosm for all that history.
But we also want to get to the heart of the man himself.
Right. And specifically, the legacy he left behind. Because for all the work he published, and there was a lot of it, which we'll get into, there's this really haunting detail at the very end of his life that I know we're going to get to.
Yes.
A final symphony that, as of right now, has never been heard.
That really stuck with me, too, the idea of a silent symphony.
It's almost cinematic.
It is. But before we get to the end, we have to start the beginning.
We do. So let's unpack the foundations of Francis Routh.
Let's do it.
We're starting in Kidderminster, England, January 5th, 1927.
A pre-depression, pre-war world.
Yeah, a completely different England than the one you or I know today.
Very different.
And he goes through the traditional education route initially. The sources mention Malvern College, Harrow School. These are, highly prestigious institutions. You really get the sense of a classic English upbringing.
You do.
But then history intervenes. The source notes that he served in the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve from 1945 to 1948.
Which is a crucial detail. Just think about those dates for a second.
Yeah.
1945.
The war is ending.
The war is ending, but the world is in absolute turmoil. And he's 18 years old.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, today you look at an 18-year-old aspiring musician, they're probably worrying about conservatory audition.
Or building up their social media following.
Right. But Routh is joining the Navy.
Precisely. He spends 3 years in the service before he really begins his artistic life in earnest. And I think that context is so important for you to keep in mind as we discuss his later work.
How so?
Well, we often forget that this generation of artists, the post-war generation, they brought a level of maturity and perhaps a very specific kind of discipline to their work because they'd seen service.
It's not just about discipline in the sense of like waking up early to practice scales, is it?
No. It's about understanding hierarchy and function. On a naval ship, everything has a place.
Right.
Every single action has a consequence. You exist in a very rigid, high-stakes structure. They had existed in that environment before they ever set foot in a composition seminar.
Which certainly sets the stage for a disciplined mind.
Absolutely.
And speaking of a disciplined mind, after the Navy, he doesn't just go to music school immediately.
Yeah.
He goes to King's College, Cambridge. But here's the curveball. He didn't just study music there. He read classics.
This is one of those details that just explains so much about his later work.
It really jumped out at me.
Because reading classics at Cambridge isn't just about learning Latin and Greek vocabulary. It's about understanding structure, rhetoric, balance, and form.
It's heavy stuff.
It is the study of the architecture of thought, essentially.
So you think that directly influenced his music?
Without a doubt. If you spend your university years analyzing, say, the meter of an epic poem or the logical arguments of ancient philosophers, you're wiring your brain to appreciate form and development.
You're learning how to construct a narrative arc that holds together.
Exactly. When he eventually sits down to write a symphony or a concerto, that classical architecture is going to be in his DNA. It suggests he wasn't interested in chaos. He was interested in coherent expression.
It's like he was learning the engineering of art before he actually learned the specific bricks of music.
That's a great way to put it. And we should note he was learning the organ at Cambridge, too.
Yes, he picked up the organ there.
And the organ is, in many ways, the most architectural of all instruments.
Right, because of its sheer size.
Size, yes, but also mechanics. It's literally a machine, a massive structure. It relies on wind pressure, mechanical linkages, levers, stops.
It's not just a piece of wood with strings on it.
No, it's not like a flute where it's just your breath and a simple tube. You are operating a complex engine. So you have this convergence of the naval discipline, the classics curriculum, and the structural complexity of the organ.
That's the foundation.
That is a rock-solid bedrock.
So after Cambridge, he finally pivots to pure music training. He heads to the Royal Academy of Music in 1951.
Where he studies with some real heavy hitters, William Alwyn for piano.
Alwyn is a big name.
Huge. Alwyn was a master melodist, famous for his film scores as much as his symphonies. He really knew how to communicate with an audience.
And then Routh studied organ with Wesley Roberts.
Right. But what fascinates me here is what happened after the academy.
The private lessons.
Yes. The source mentions he took private composition lessons with Matthias Seiber.
Why is that significant? I mean, he already went to the Royal Academy. He's got the pedigree. Why go get a private tutor after you've already graduated from a top-tier institution?
It shows a very specific kind of hunger. The academy gives you the broad strokes, right? The credential, the network. But seeking out Seiber, who was a Hungarian composer living in England, that tells us something else entirely.
What does it tell us?
Well, Seiber was known for being quite rigorous and very knowledgeable about modern techniques, specifically the European modernist traditions that might not have been the main focus at the Royal Academy at that specific time.
So the Academy was perhaps a bit more, I don't know, traditional.
A bit more English establishment, perhaps, whereas Seiber represented the wider, more experimental world. Routh going to him shows that he wasn't satisfied with just being good enough for the English scene.
He wanted to push himself.
He wanted to refine his specific voice. He wanted to understand the absolute nuts and bolts of composition on a much deeper level.
It's like getting your degree, but then going out and hiring a master craftsman to teach you the actual secrets of the trade.
Exactly. It implies that he took the craft of composition incredibly seriously. He wasn't just, waiting for inspiration to strike from the heavens. He was actively honing his tools.
So let's talk about those tools.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his voice. He spends the 50s training, organizing, getting ready. And by the early 1960s, he really starts to get noticed.
Yes.
The source describes his style in a very specific way. It calls it chromatic, but still tonal.
Now, that is a phrase we need to unpack because it appears a lot in descriptions of his work, and if you aren't a music theorist, it can be a bit confusing.
Please do unpack it, because to a layperson, that might sound like a complete contradiction.
It does, doesn't it? Think of tonal music as having a home base.
Okay.
When you're listening to a piece of music and you can just sort of feel where it's going to resolve, you feel the key of the song. It's like gravity.
Like when a pop song ends on that final satisfying chord.
Exactly. No matter how high the melody jumps, you know where the ground is. That's tonality.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's grounded.
Right. Now, chromatic refers to using all the notes in between the standard scale steps. The black keys on the piano, essentially, slipping in and out. It adds color, tension, ambiguity.
So it makes it less straightforward.
Yes. If a simple tonal song is a primary color painting, just red, yellow, blue chromaticism is adding thousands of shades of shadow and neon in sharp contrast.
I like that analogy.
So when Routh is described as chromatic but still tonal, it means he's pushing the boundaries. He's wandering far away from home, using complex, colorful, modern harmonies that might sound dissonant or edgy.
But he never completely burns the house down.
Exactly. He never abandons that sense of a tonal center entirely.
So it's modern, but not alienating.
That is a really great way to put it. He's not writing purely a tonal noise where there is zero gravity and you just float in space without a compass. He is writing music that communicates, that has a logic you can follow. It's just dressed in a very sophisticated mid-century harmonic language.
Let's look at some of the works that actually established this voice. We mentioned his background in classics earlier, and that seems to pop up immediately in his vocal works.
It definitely does. In 1962, he writes a song cycle called A Woman Young and Old, which is based on Yeats.
And then in 1963, 4 Shakespeare songs.
Both heavy literary hitters.
Yeah, he's not messing around.
He isn't setting simple nursery rhymes, that's for sure. And then later, in 1972, he writes The Death of Iphigenia,
which is a direct callback to his classics degree. The text is by Aeschylus from the Oresteia.
It is.
And the death of Iphigenia is a heavy, tragic subject.
It's about as heavy as it gets in literature. Sacrifice, betrayal, the whims of the gods. For a composer to tackle Greek tragedy, they need a real sense of grandeur and dramatic pacing.
It's not light listening.
No. And this confirms that Routh wasn't just writing pretty little tunes to be played in the background. He was engaging with serious, weighty literature. He treated the music as an extension of that literary tradition.
He was probably analyzing the text just like he did back at Cambridge.
Oh, surely. He was likely analyzing the rhythm of the text just as closely as he analyzed the notes themselves.
Now, we can't talk about Routh without talking about the organ.
No, we cannot.
You mentioned it was his instrument at Cambridge and at the Academy. The list of his organ works in our sources is, well, it's extensive.
It's central to his entire output. The organ was his laboratory. And there's one massive project that really stands out in the source material, the Sacred Tetralogy.
The name alone sounds imposing. The Sacred Tetralogy. It sounds like a high fantasy novel series.
It really does, but it's actually a set of 4 major organ works composed between 1959 and 1974.
Wait, 1959 and 1974, that's a 15-year span?
15 years to complete one cycle. That shows incredible persistence. Just think about how much the world changed between 1959 and 1974.
Everything changed. Culture, politics, music.
Everything. Yet he stuck with this singular project. The works are The Manger Throne from 1960, Lumen Christi from 1968, Aeterna Rex Saltitia from 1970, and Gloria Tibi Trinitas from 1974.
Lumen Christi, Light of Christ. Gloria Tibi Kitty, Trinitas Glory to the Trinity. These are deeply religious titles.
They are, and they suggest that, for Routh, the organ wasn't just a concert instrument, it was a vessel for spiritual expression.
Right.
And calling it a tetralogy implies a unified artistic statement. He is building a cathedral out of sound. And when you consider his style, that chromatic-tonal language we just talked about, these pieces likely have an immense power to them.
Because the organ can handle that kind of density.
Exactly. The organ can sustain these long, complex chords that shift and evolve slowly over time. It is the perfect medium for his harmonic language because the organ literally breathes. It has infinite sustain.
As long as the blower's running, the sound doesn't stop.
Precisely.
But he didn't start there with the organ, though. There's an English organ book from 1972 and 4 Marian antiphons from 1989.
Which tells us he was contributing to the everyday repertoire. He wasn't just playing for himself, he was giving other organists new material to play.
Practical material.
Yes. An English organ book sounds like something specifically designed to be used to be part of the canon of English church and recital music. He was trying to ensure that the English organ tradition had new, vibrant music to keep it alive.
But he wasn't stuck in the organ loft. We had to look at his orchestral output. I was honestly surprised by how many concertos he wrote.
It's a very healthy list.
Yeah, let's look at it. Violin concerto in 65, double concerto in 70, cello concerto in 73, piano concerto in 76, and an oboe concerto in 84.
That covers almost every major solo instrument family.
It does. And writing a concerto is a very specific challenge, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. You have to balance a solo ego, a single melodic line, against a massive orchestra.
Right, ensuring the soloist isn't drowned out, but the orchestra isn't bored.
Exactly. You have to understand the specific mechanics of the violin, the cello, the oboe. It shows he was a highly practical musician who understood how instruments actually worked in the real world. He likely knew the soloists he was writing for, understanding their individual strengths and weaknesses.
And then there are the symphonies.
The big ones.
The heavyweights. Symphony No. 1 in 1973.
And then a pause?
A huge pause. Symphony No. 2 doesn't appear until 2003.
That is a 30-year gap between his first and second symphony.
30 years.
What do we make of that? Why wait 30 years to write your second symphony?
It is really fascinating to speculate on that. This source doesn't explicitly tell us why, But look at what else he was doing during that time, which we'll get to in a moment.
He was busy.
Very busy. He was organizing concerts, editing magazines, teaching. Life happens. But also, the symphony is a daunting form. It is the novel of the music world.
It's a major statement.
Right. Maybe he felt he had said what he needed to say in 1973, and it simply took 3 decades of living, of changes in the musical landscape, before he felt he had something new to say in that specific form.
It speaks to that longevity we mentioned at the start. He didn't burn out. He kept going. He didn't just retire in the 90s and stop writing. And he kept evolving. We have to mention the chamber music, too. The dance suite for string quartet, mosaics for 2 violins, and his late piano work, The Well Tempered Pianist from 2009.
Another title that feels like a massive nod to history. Bach wrote The Well Tempered Clavier.
Exactly. Routh rates 24 preludes. That is a direct conversation with Bach, and with Chopin, and with Shostakovich, who also wrote sets of 24 preludes and fugues.
He's placing himself in that direct lineage.
He is, and the source notes it was actually performed and recorded by Charles Matthews. So even in 2009, when Routh is in his 80s, he is creating substantial, ambitious cycles of music that are being brought to life.
Which brings us to the unheard finale we teased earlier, Symphony No. 3.
Written between 2010 and 2012.
So he's in his mid-80s while writing this.
Yes. And the source gives us a really poignant detail about this piece. It incorporates and develops material from some of his previous compositions.
So it's a retrospective.
It is a musical memoir. He is looking back at his entire life's work, taking themes or ideas from earlier pieces, maybe things he wrote in the 50s or the 70s, and weaving them into a final symphonic statement.
It's a summation of his artistic identity.
Yeah.
And yet, the source says, it remains unperformed.
That is the real tragedy here, a lifetime of experience synthesized into a final symphony, and it's just sitting in a drawer or an archive somewhere.
It really makes you wonder what we are missing. It's like finding the final unpublished manuscript of a great novelist.
It does. But Routh's legacy isn't just about the notes he wrote. It is about the notes he helped other people get heard. We really need to shift gears and talk about the organizer.
The organizer. This is part 3 of our dive, and honestly, this might be where he had the most tangible, everyday impact on the life of British music.
I agree completely.
It starts in the 1950s. The source says he began organizing informal performances in St. Luke's Church, Redcliffe Square.
Just a local church. This is real grassroots stuff. He's with colleagues from the Royal Academy, probably drinking tea and complaining that nobody's playing their music. And they just decide, well, we need a place to play new music. Let's do it ourselves.
And from those informal church gigs, things snowball. It evolves into the Redcliffe Festival, which ran between 1957 and 1961.
Right.
And then, the big one, the Redcliffe Concerts of British Music, founded in 1963.
The Redcliffe Concerts became a legitimate brand. They moved from the church to the Arts Council at St. James's Square. And then in 1967, they hit the major league.
The Queen Elizabeth Hall and the Purcell Room on the South Bank.
For listeners who don't know the geography of London, that is the center of cultural life.
It is the absolute heart.
It is the equivalent of moving from a garage band to playing Carnegie Hall. It is a massive step up in prestige and visibility. And this series ran for 22 years, until 1989.
That is an incredible run for a concert series focused exclusively on British music.
And the British music part is key. The source says the mission was promoting British music. He wasn't just putting on Beethoven and Mozart to sell easy tickets.
No, and he wasn't just promoting himself either, which I think is the mark of a true statesman of the arts. He championed the Tippett generation.
The source mentions a 21st anniversary series in autumn 1985 that surveyed composers like Constant Lambert, Alan Rawsthorn, and Michael Tippett.
These are major figures.
They are, but Routh was ensuring they were contextualized and celebrated as a movement. He was building a narrative of British music history. He was saying to the public, look at what we have achieved in this country.
He also looked backward, too. The source mentions he revised and edited the works of Samuel Wesley.
Samuel Wesley is an interesting figure, a 19th century composer who is often overshadowed. Routh taking the time to edit his works for modern performance shows, he saw the Redcliffe Concerts as a way to connect the deep past to the present.
He's saying, here's where we came from and here's where we are.
Exactly. And doing all this with the backing of the Greater London Council, which gave it real institutional weight.
But here is where it gets really interesting to me. We talked about his background classics, the organ, the navy, chromatic, but tonal. You picture a fairly traditional academic guy.
Right. A very establishment figure.
Maybe wearing a tweed jacket with elbow patches.
Definitely.
But then, look at what happened on January 15, 1968 at the Queen Elizabeth Hall.
This is the aha moment of his organizing career. This is the plot twist.
The source identifies it as one of the earliest concerts of electronic music by British composers held in Britain.
In 1968, think about that.
It's so early for that.
Electronic music was still in its absolute infancy. We aren't talking about sleek synthesizers or laptops as we know them today. We are talking about the wild avant-garde.
And the lineup is legendary. Tristram Cary, Delia Derbyshire, George Newson, Daphne Oram, Peters and Aviv.
Delia Derbyshire and Daphne Oram are icons now. They are the pioneers of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. They are the people who literally made the sounds of the future.
The Doctor Who theme, right?
Exactly. But in 1968, putting this on in a concert hall was weird stuff. It involved tape loops, raw oscillators, physically cutting magnetic tape with razor blades and sticking it back together.
It was probably seen as just noise by the classical elite.
Oh, absolutely. It was highly controversial.
And here's Francis Routh, the organist, the classic scholar, giving them a platform at the Queen Elizabeth Hall.
It reveals an incredible open-mindedness. You might expect someone with his strict classical background to turn up his nose at beeps and boops.
Right.
But he didn't. He recognized that this was a vital, growing part of the British musical landscape. He saw the value in it. It shows he wasn't a gatekeeper trying to keep things traditional. He was opening the gates for true innovation.
That contrast is just wild to me. The man writing the Sacred Tetralogy for organ is the exact same man booking a gig for Delia Derbyshire.
It proves that for Routh, British music was a very big tent. It included everything. And, perhaps there is a connection. We talked about the organ being a machine. Early electronic music was also intensely mechanical. It was about directly manipulating sound waves and voltage. Maybe his analytical mind saw the connection between the windpipes of an organ and the electronic oscillators of a synthesizer.
That is a fascinating thought, the mechanics of sound.
Yes.
And he didn't just stop at concerts, he got into the business side too. In 1989, he formed Redcliffe Records and Redcliffe Publishing.
Which is the logical next step, because concerts are ephemeral.
Right, you play it once and it's gone.
Once they are done, they are done. The applause fades. But recordings and printed scores last forever. By starting a label and a publishing house, he was ensuring that the music is own, but also works by people like Priel Vernet and Graham Wedham had a permanent home.
He was securing the legacy.
He was taking the means of production into his own hands, which is incredibly forward-thinking for a classical composer of his era.
So we have the composer and we have the organizer. But there was one more hat he wore. The scholar.
Because apparently writing symphonies and running a 22-year concert series just wasn't enough work for one man.
I know, right? When did this guy sleep?
The source tells us he taught music at Morley College starting in 1971.
Morley College has a great tradition of adult education and music, so he's out there passing on the knowledge directly to students.
But he's also writing. He was the editor of Composer magazine from 1980 to 1987.
Being an editor is a really powerful position. You shape the conversation.
You decide what gets discussed. Composer magazine was a crucial forum for the profession. It forced him to be in touch with the issues facing composers in the 80s, funding, aesthetics, technology. He had his finger constantly on the pulse.
And he wrote books, actual physical books.
Several of them.
Playing the Organ in 1958.
Which was a practical instruction manual.
Contemporary Music, an introduction in 1968.
An educational text, probably helping everyday people understand the weird new sounds of the 60s we were just talking about.
And Contemporary British Music, 1945-1970, published in 1972.
Now, that one is deeply significant. He is writing the history of his own era while he is living it.
That's tough to do objectively.
It takes a lot of confidence and a very analytical mind. He is documenting the first 25 years of post-war British music. He is trying to make sense of the chaos of the present. He's saying to his readers, this is what happened, and this is why it matters.
And finally, a book on Stravinsky in 1975.
Which brings us back full circle to that chromatic but tonal idea.
Oh, right.
Stravinsky is the ultimate model for that fiercely modernist but deeply rooted in structure and tradition. It makes perfect sense Routh would write about him. Stravinsky was the giant of the century, and Routh clearly saw him as kindred spirit in terms of valuing structure and clarity over pure emotion.
So how does this writing side complement the composer side? I mean, why do both?
It forces you to articulate why music matters. When you compose, you are working mostly with intuition and raw sound. When you write about music, you have to use logic and language.
You have to explain yourself.
Exactly. Ruth was doing both. The scholar informed the composer, and the organizer gave the composer a platform. It is a complete self-sustaining ecosystem of a career.
It really is. It's incredibly impressive. So we reached the end of the timeline. Francis Routh died on November 27, 2021.
At the age of 94.
The source notes the funeral was at St. Peter's Church, Hammersmith, followed by a committal at Mortlake Crematorium.
A quiet end to a very loud, very full life.
When we sum it up, the numbers are just impressive. 85 published works spanning 60 years.
And remember, that's just the composition stats. That doesn't count the hundreds of concerts he organized, the students he taught at Morley, the articles he edited, or the books he wrote.
It's a legacy that touches literally every part of the musical world. Performance, creation, education, promotion.
He was a true custodian of British music. He took care of it, he nurtured it, he made sure it had a place to live.
But I can't help but go back to that one loose end.
The Symphony No. 3.
Yeah. It's the final provocative thought I want to leave you, our listeners, with today. Here is a man who spent his entire life ensuring other people's music was heard. He organized the concerts, he published the scores, he fought for the underdog in 1968.
He did the work.
He did. And yet, his own final statement, his musical memoir, the culmination of 94 years of life and art, remains unperformed.
It is a profound irony.
It is, and it makes me think about the medium. You know, if he had just recorded a digital file and put it on a blog, anyone could hear it. But because it's a symphony, because it requires an orchestra, a hall, a budget, a physical gathering, it sits in silence.
The physical medium is the barrier.
Exactly. It raises a challenge for us and for you listening. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with the new. We want the latest release, the newest young star, the next big premiere.
Always looking forward.
But what else is hidden in the archives because of that obsession? Does the drive for new premieres actually kill the revival of late-in-life masterpieces? Here is a treasure, a Symphony No. 3 by a master craftsman, just sitting in a drawer.
Wait.
What is the true value of a musician? Is it the fame they have while they're alive? Or is it what they leave behind for us to find later? If the physical score is there, waiting to be digitized or performed, maybe the story isn't over.
I think Francis Routh would say the value is in the work itself. He did the work. He wrote the notes. He respected the structure. Now, it is up to us, the next generation of organizers, conductors, and musicians, to open that drawer, take out the score, and bring it to life.
Maybe one of you listening right now is the person to do it. That's all for this deep dive into the life of Francis Routh, a fascinating journey through a century of British music. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Keep listening and keep digging.